One moment, it's a routine flight. The next, your plane is plummeting, or another aircraft is bearing down on you. Mere seconds from impact. These aren't just stories. They're the adrenaline-pumping, heart-stopping realities faced by pilots. Get ready for a rare, intense glimpse into the moment's aviation nearly went terribly wrong. The runway glowed under the soft morning sun as Flight 278 slowly lined up for departure. Inside the cockpit, Captain Harris and First Officer Malik completed their final checks with calm precision. The aircraft vibrated gently. The engines hummed with steady confidence, and the entire cabin felt peaceful. No one on board had the slightest idea that within seconds this calm would explode into the most terrifying moment of their lives. Harris eased the throttles forward, and the aircraft surged down the runway with full power. Malik announced, 80 knots, and Harris replied, checked. The speed climbed rapidly, 90, 100, 110. Passengers relaxed, some settling into their seats, some closing their eyes. Everything looked normal, routine, predictable until the world violently changed. At exactly 123 knots, just seconds before rotation, a massive boom tore through the left side of the aircraft. Engine number 2 exploded in a burst of fire, sending shrapnel slamming into the wing. The plane jolted so hard that passengers screamed and overhead bins rattled. Inside the cockpit, alarms erupted instantly. Malik shouted, engine failure. Engine 2, as the aircraft struggled to stay aligned on the runway. With only seconds to make a life-or-death decision, Harris didn't hesitate. Continued takeoff. Saeed firmly. They were past the point where aborting was safe. The runway was too short to stop. The aircraft lifted off the ground, wobbling violently, the left side dropping due to the lost engine. Passengers felt the tilt and grabbed their armrests in panic as the jet fought to climb. Alarms flashed red as fire warnings lit up across the cockpit. Malik called out, engine to fire, his voice tight with fear. Harris stayed steady, reaching forward. Fire handle pulled, he said, cutting fuel to the burning engine and activating the extinguishers. But even with the fire suppression system engaged, the aircraft shook so aggressively it felt like something huge was pulling it out of the sky. In the cabin, a thin layer of smoke drifted from the left side, and passengers began coughing. Flight attendants rushed down the aisle, trying to keep everyone calm, even as fear cracked through their voices. Please, stay seated. The pilots are trained for this, one attendant announced, though her shaking hands told a different story. Panic spread through the rows as turbulence hit. Harris grabbed the radio. Mayday, mayday, mayday. Flight 278. We've had an engine explosion. Climbing on one engine. Request immediate vectors to return. Air traffic control instantly responded, clearing them back to the airport. Emergency crews began racing into position on the ground as the aircraft struggled to maintain altitude. With only one functioning engine, the jet fought desperately to stay airborne. Every bump of turbulence felt violent, like the wings could shear off at any moment. Harris kept a tight grip on the yoke, muscles trembling as he held the plane steady. Malik monitored the instruments, calling out corrections. Together they battled the imbalance, the drag, and the raw force of a wounded aircraft trying to survive. The crew began preparing for an emergency landing. Malik read through the checklist. His voice was more controlled now. Flaps set, geared down. Harris knew this would be a fast and heavy landing. There was no way to slow properly with only one engine. The runway grew larger in front of them, lined with fire trucks and flashing emergency lights. The aircraft slammed onto the runway with a violent impact, bouncing and skidding as sparks shot from the landing gear. Reverse thrust activated on the single working engine, pulling the aircraft to the left. Harris fought the yoke again, wrestling the jet into a straight line. The tires screeched, the fuselage rattled, and the entire plane shook as it slowed down, and slowed down, until it finally stopped. For a moment, there was absolute silence. No one moved. No one spoke. It was the eerie quiet that follows a miracle. Then, slowly, passengers began crying, praying, and cheering in disbelief. They were alive. Everyone was alive. Harris finally exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. That, he whispered, was too close. Outside, emergency crews surrounded the plane, extinguishing the remaining smoke from the damaged engine. Inside, passengers evacuated cautiously, still shaking, some clutching each other as they stepped onto the runway. It was later confirmed that a catastrophic metal fatigue failure caused the engine to explode and the captain's decision not to abort saved 162 lives. A decision made in seconds that protected an entire plane. The flight drifted quietly through the night sky, cruising high above the Atlantic Ocean. The cabin was bathed in a warm amber glow, and most passengers were asleep. Captain Reyes sat in the cockpit enjoying the calm, occasionally glancing at the steady instruments. Everything felt peaceful ordinary, just another overnight flight. But 15 rows behind him, a moment was beginning to form that would shatter the tranquility of the entire aircraft. Flight attendant Julia walked down the aisle, checking on passengers. As she passed the emergency exit row, she noticed a man sitting stiffly, his hood pulled low, his eyes darting around with an uneasy intensity. Something about him felt off, like he wasn't fully present. "Sir, are you okay?" she asked softly. He didn't respond. He simply stared through her, his breathing shallow, fingers tapping rapidly on his leg. Julia felt a knot tighten in his stomach, but she continued her walk, hoping it was nothing more than nerves. 20 quiet minutes passed before the sudden screams. Julia spun around and saw passengers jumping out of their seats near the emergency exit. The same man was standing now, gripping the exit door handle with both hands, pulling with sheer desperation. The sight froze her blood. Even though the door can't open at cruising altitude, the attempt alone could send the entire cabin into panic. She rushed forward. "Sir, step away from the door," she shouted, but he didn't even acknowledge her. His eyes were wild, unfocused, as he yanked at the handle harder. Passengers cried out in terror. One man tried to restrain him, but the stranger shoved him violently, nearly knocking him into the aisle. Chaos rippled through the cabin. Julia grabbed the interphone with trembling fingers. "Captain, we have a situation. A passenger is trying to open the exit door." There was silence on the line for half a second. Then Captain Reyes answered, "We're on our way." Inside the cockpit, the comm broke instantly. Reyes and his first officer exchanged a look. An unstable passenger at 35,000 feet was every crew's worst nightmare. In the cabin, 2 more flight attendants joined Julia, approaching slowly, trying not to provoke the man. His breathing was uneven, panicked, almost animal-like. "Sir, you're safe. You're okay." Julia tried again, her voice gentle but shaking. He whispered something under his breath, words she couldn't understand, then suddenly lunged at the handle again with frightening force. This time, 3 male passengers grabbed him from behind, struggling as he thrashed wildly, screaming that he needed to get out, that he had to leave. Captain Reyes finally reached the scene and stepped in with authority. "Move aside," he said firmly. He worked with the passengers to pin the man to a seat. The stranger fought back with unnatural strength, but eventually Reyes managed to secure his wrists with flex cuffs. The man sank back into the seat, chest rising and falling rapidly, his eyes unfocused and terrified, as if he didn't even know where he was. Reyes knelt in front of him. "Can you hear me? What's your name?" The man didn't answer. His expression flickered between confusion and fear. "Are you on medication? Are you in pain?" Still, nothing. The silence felt heavier than the struggle that had just happened. Reyes stood and exchanged a look with Julia. This wasn't aggression. This was something else. Something deeper. Something broken inside the man's mind. And it wasn't safe to continue the flight like this. The captain picked up the interphone and addressed the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, due to a medical and safety emergency, we will be making an emergency diversion. Please remain seated." The aircraft began descending, not sharply, but noticeably, causing ears to pop and whispers to spread across the cabin. Some passengers prayed, others stared at the restrained man in disbelief. Julia stayed close, keeping watch, though her hands still shook uncontrollably. Captain Reyes coordinated with a TC for an immediate landing. Emergency services were placed on standby. The aircraft descended through layers of clouds before touching down. The landing was smooth, but the tension inside the plane was overwhelming. The moment the aircraft stopped, Police and medical teams boarded. They approached the man carefully, and he didn't resist. He simply looked lost, murmuring incoherently as they escorted him away. It was later revealed he had suffered a sudden, severe psychotic episode mid-flight. In the end, it was anti-technology alone that protected the aircraft. It was the crew and passengers coming together in a moment of danger.